Fingers crossed, dude. No down trees.
Yeah, no down trees or
down
inclement
trees
weather
today.
tonight that are gonna put a wrench into our plans. That was fun.
Yeah, it's
Behind the
not a lot.
scenes for our listeners, we tried to record, I don't know, like 4 or 5 days ago now, and we had some inclement weather, which kind of threw a wrench because a tree actually fell right up the street from us, and it took out my cable and, or I should say internet, cable internet, but the cable internet, and more importantly, the electricity until the next morning. So needless to say, we had to do a little bit of rescheduling. The weather and Mother Nature was not cooperating with our podcasting schedule, unfortunately. It's kind of a bummer. It is what it is. We're back.
Yep. We're ready to go.
Hi, I'm Nick.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the PUDs Podcast.
Fresh, ready
What's
to go.
Up, man?
Nothing much, dude. Just getting back and settling in back on the East Coast. I was in Las Vegas for a big tech conference, Amazon Web Services reInvent. So it's good to be back on the East Coast. Good to have some humidity in my life again. It was very, very dry out there. It was really digging the Impact Botanicals hand repair cream. It works really well if you have dry hands. So yeah, I'm gonna on a shout out on that one. I used it.
Love it.
Yeah, shameless plug.
Love it.
Yeah, but it worked very well out there. Went into that sphere thing and saw a show, so that was cool. And kind of recapping back to sort of after Thanksgiving, before I left, I got out for a couple hikes around Jamestown and Newport in Rhode Island with Ryland, so that was cool. We went over to Beavertail and Statuesque Point Wildlife Refuge, so really cool local little hikes if you're in the area and wanted to get by the ocean and the seaside. So we had a lot of fun. What's up with you, dude?
Not much, man. I feel like that Las Vegas dome is like been like a huge pop culture thing. So
the sphere.
Cool that you get to see that. Yeah, that sphere. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was
cool that you get to see that.
And maybe some people saw through my my Instagram stories, but and I think I did one post. But so that sphere thing too, it's basically like I would describe it as an IMAX theater on steroids inside. Was really neat. I don't know how tall it is. It's got to be like at least, I don't know, 300 feet tall, something like that. It's a good size. And the outside of it's completely covered with LEDs, and it has all different animations and stuff, like videos of like from like the Rockettes dancing to like every morning you get basically lit up like a glowing ball of fire for like the sun. Yeah, it was kind of, from my hotel room, it was nice. You could actually see the sunrise every morning, and then the sphere was sort of out in the corner. So it was keeping me entertained when I was back in my room for limited periods of time. Yeah, it was, I think one of my favorite ones too was after the sun rose, it was this little yellow smiley, and then he'd like whip out a little cup of coffee and start sipping on it. So that was pretty funny. But I didn't know how big of a thing it is.
Yeah, you're gonna share those pictures out some more for this episode. But yeah, that was cool. It is a big thing. Like, the social medias love the sphere.
Yeah, it was neat. Unfortunately, I didn't get.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, unfortunately, I didn't get to see like a one of the rock shows there, because I know you two had a residency, I guess you would say, there for maybe like a year, and they have a film that was filmed there. I guess there's all special recording equipment they use for music and video to be able to like project it. But that actually wasn't until like one of the later nights, which I just couldn't do because we had a vendor thing, and then the Eagles were playing there on Friday night, but that's when I left, so I didn't catch that. But we did go see like their stock show that was called Postcard from Earth, which was really, really cool, and I recommend it. It was a little pricey, but considering like water was like $7 or $8 for like a 32 ounce thing of water, it really wasn't bad to pay like $90 or whatever for a ticket to go see a show. So it was pretty reasonable from that standpoint. But yeah, man,
that's funny, dude. That's funny. Yeah, I got we took the family to first off to go see Santa's house over in Bristol. We're in full Christmas mode over here.
Yeah,
so
we're here.
We are.
It's coming.
Shoulders deep, dude. Shoulders deep in Christmas.
I think I might be neck deep in Christmas.
Yeah. But yeah, man. I know I talked about it before, but the Bristol Santa house we go to every year for the past like 3 years or so. I think it's only been around 3 years, so we've been going since they first got started. But we went to it again this year, and it's an awesome house that they put together. It's basically in the middle of this park, and it's put on by this nonprofit organization. Um, so it's all funded by donations, and I think the proceeds go to, I think it's like the John Riley Foundation or something like that.
Oh,
But
okay.
basically helps kids with, I think handicapped children. It might help out. I know there's a big push for that, and yeah, this Santa that they have there is incredible, dude. He's decked out. He's just
Yeah, it looks
patient.
so legit. I mean, I've seen pictures from
Yeah,
previous years when you've gone there, but
yeah,
it looks
yeah.
like, I don't know. It looks really good. How do you say it? Like, it just looks authentic. He
Looks
looks like he could be
good.
Santa. Like, if he's an exceptionally good looking Santa, for
Yeah,
sure.
no, he's phenomenal. And not only does he like dress the part and look the part, and he just acts the part too. Like he's just like very kind, and he listens to the kids and has like a full conversation with the kids and asks them what they want. Like before he even has them sit and tell him what he wants for Christmas, like he has like a full conversation with them, talks to them, and like really just makes them comfortable, and then they do that whole part of asking what they want for Christmas and all that. So, so it does take a little bit longer. Like I think there was only like 10 families in front of us
Mm.
on the night that we
Is it
went.
by
And
appointment or?
yeah,
I'll
they
throw
do
I'll throw a
appointments.
link to this in the show notes too if there's anybody in the area that wants to check it out.
Yeah, they do appointments, but they filled up pretty quick. So, we had to go to when there was like walk-ins available, and yeah, there was like 10 families ahead of us, but it took us like an hour and a half to get in there to see Santa. So, but yeah, it's worth it because once you get in there, it's a magical, well decorated interior, and that Santa's great. He takes his time with the kids. There's no rush, and then people in there will take the pictures. They take the pictures of you and your family if you provide them your phone or whatever, and it's like the best thing you could do for free. I see all these people going to malls and Bass Pro Shop and all these places to take pictures with Santa and pay to take these pictures, and they're like terrible. Like this is the best. This is the best like Santa experience you could have, and it's free. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's pretty neat, man. You'll have
Yeah.
to check it out at some point.
Yeah, so we did that, and they do the Bristol Christmas Festival every year, which is really cool. So that was this past weekend. So we checked that out, and we do it every year. There's a bunch of different vendors. They got a bunch of different food, and we make our own wreath there every year, which is an absolute steal because it's like $15 for the wreath.
Dude, that's
like,
cheap. I feel like it's
I know,
nowadays
dude.
it's like $30-$40 for a good wreath.
I didn't realize it. I didn't realize it until we went to a tree farm like later, and I'm like, wow, we like make out every year. It's like $15. There's all kinds of stuff you can decorate it with, and then yeah, we just hang it up every year. So yeah, they have all kinds of stuff like that, stuff for the kids, like food, mulled wine, stuff like that, like different vendors and different people selling like their crafts and things. So yeah, it's really fun. It's really
Oh
cool.
man. Yeah,
So
well,
check it out. Bristol Christmas Festival, Bristol Santa House, all cool stuff.
yeah, we'll link them in case you want to check them out. And on the topic, we did go get our Christmas tree over the weekend, like Saturday after I got back. So that was a lot of fun.
Nice.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah, shout out to
That's
J&L
awesome.
Landscaping and Seekonk. Always have. It seems like they have more affordable prices. Like, because I remember I mentioned to you that it was like $60 for our tree, and you're like, wow, it was only
Oh
$60,
yeah,
which I still
yeah,
think
it's
is
crazy.
expensive. But I know some like the other farm we used to go to in Swansea, which I won't shout out because I do enjoy them, but like their Christmas tree prices were like price gouging. But I want to say like the same tree, the same height tree that was more, or I guess less full or whatever. I feel like the last year we got there was like almost $90, and at that point I was like,
Yeah,
I'm usually throwing the guy like $20 for fresh cuts or something too because it's Christmas, and we got my mom's tree too. I just throw them in the back of our truck and we drive
yeah.
over there. So, but yeah, man,
Cool.
it was good to get that done. Feeling Christmassy, looking Christmassy down here. I got a fake tree in the studio, in Black Cat Studio, so it's looking nice up here, looking festive.
I know you got the two trees going. You got
Yeah,
two
we
trees
got
going. You're crushing it, dude.
we're dual treeing. That's why I said I'm neck deep in Christmas right now.
You're right, deep.
All right, man. Want to get in the next music moment?
Sure, man. I think you actually had one more thing to talk about.
Oh, yes, I did. Thank you for reminding me.
You're welcome.
So before we move on to the next music moment, I did have a little bit of hiking related news. And unfortunately, I feel like we had, I guess, some bad news on the last podcast too, sort of an intro in regards to hiking. But there's been a hiker lost in the Adirondacks. And as of a few days ago, they actually changed it into a sort of limited continuous search, and they shifted it to a recovery. So I guess there was a French-Canadian hiker, Leo Dufour, only 22 years old. So that's super sad. He had been lost since December 1st. I guess his father reported him missing when he was overdue around 2:30 a.m. on the 1st. I guess he originally signed into the Mount Adams trailhead on Friday, November 29th, so the Friday right after Thanksgiving. He was looking to do a solo single-day trip out to Mount Allen, which is one of the longest hikes mileage-wise in terms of the Adirondack 46 high peaks. It's about 18 miles round trip, I believe. And part of it is a more or less like a bushwhack. It's probably following herd paths. I haven't been out there myself yet. It's one of those ones that I still got to get to that I'm not particularly probably looking forward to because I don't think it's really got views. But super unfortunate situation. I think they recovered like a water bottle around 3,500 feet, but didn't really see much of them. And I guess they just can't find him. And I mean, it kind of just shows to how big that wilderness is out there and how remote some of those places are in the Adirondack Park. So our thoughts are with his family. And again, tough time of year for something like this to happen. I mean, you never know, but at this point, again, like it's a recovery for someone to be out there that long and not find them it's pretty bleak to say the least. And it sounds like he was prepared, he was experienced. Sometimes things go wrong, but hopefully they can recover at some point and get him home, to say the least.
Yeah.
But it's a sad situation.
So,
yeah.
Let's hope so. It's kind of crazy, but you can always hold out hope.
Yep. Agreed. All right. You want to get into the... I can't say Nick's music moment tonight. You want to get into the Nick's music moment?
I'd love to. Nick's music moment is brought to you by Impact Botanicals, our newest sponsor. Happy to have them on board. And we're thrilled to recommend a few of their products that we've used personally. Nick just mentioned it, I think, a few minutes ago, the Working Hands Balm.
Yep.
And I just finally got over to him the recovery aid.
Yes, we finally saw each other. Not that, well, in person, I should say.
Yeah. So, I mean, if this time of year, I mean, I brought up in that episode, I work with my hands a lot. If you are working with your hands and you're dealing with dry, cracked, or callous skin, the Working Hands Balm is exactly what you need. Using the healing power of comfrey and calendula, it quickly restores your skin to its best condition and is ideal for those of us who are tough on our equipment. But that's not all. For the sore muscles and joints after a strenuous day, Recovery Aid is here to help. The complex formula is packed with anti-inflammatory herbs that repair damaged tissue and expedite your recovery. And best of all, it's CBD-free and most effective when used regularly. I'm also been using the beard oil. My beard has been
it's looking good.
So beautiful.
It's looking nice.
Shiny and lush.
Yeah, I saw it in person too, and it looks even better in person.
It does look even better in person, but the Impact Botanicals products, they're not just good for you, they're good for the planet too, as we discussed. All their products are organic, they're produced with solar power, and with every purchase, they remove a pound of plastic from nature and convert it into energy. So it's that time of year. There's only a few more days till Christmas. If you got any last minute stocking stuffers or last minute people you need to buy for, definitely go on, check out Impact Botanicals. The shipping is fast. They'll get it to you in a few days. So if you're ready to transform your body care routine, check out Impact Botanicals today at myimpactbotanicals.com, and you can use promo code PUDs for 20% off. So that's PUDS for 20% off at myimpactbotanicals.com.
All right, so for tonight's Nick's music moment, I have another band that I found through the Sirius XMU channel, which I believe is Sirius XM's sort of a indie music college radio station vibe kind of channel, but they have some good stuff occasionally. And this album is called Dulling the Horns by the band Wild Pink. Just came out in 2024. So Wild Pink, I couldn't find a ton of information on them. Again, I don't think they're super popular. They do have a couple albums in their catalog, but they're an American indie rock band from New York City. Sounds like maybe a couple guys from a couple different boroughs of New York City. So fairly local. I mean, even to here in New York, they're close enough. Interesting kind of blend. Yeah, close enough. Interesting blend of music. I don't know. It's like a lot of people I was curious to see what people classify them as. But a lot of it's just like Americana rock is kind of the thing that I was coming with this album in particular. A lot of fuzzy, distorted guitars, and sort of recurring riffs. Very interesting lyrics that the singer or the guy that's writing the music has. Like they're very candid. Interesting blend of the vocals that go with those, sort of the whole vibe and the lyrics and everything too. And like I really think this dude, like I should have looked up his name, but he's like a blend between like a Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, and like a Bruce Hornsby. Like I was listening to him, and I know that's kind of like a weird all over the map, but if you listen to how this dude sings and some of his lyrics, like you'd get it. Like it's just interesting. I really think it's an album worth checking out. Some of my favorite songs off it are Disintegrate, Sprinter Brain, and the title track Dulling the Horns. Just something different. Recommend them if you're kind of into that kind of Americana sort of rock, or if you just like fuzzy guitars and stuff, sort of like I do. Yeah, Wild Pink, check them out. And I thought their band name was cool. Like Wild Pink, definitely. It just sounds cool. Sounds like an indie rock band for sure.
That's awesome.
So you got any Josh's Jazzy tonight?
Yeah, just all Christmas music.
Just all Christmas music all the time.
Yeah, just every Christmas
Fair
song
enough.
ever.
Fair enough.
Yeah, just dive on in. Ariana Grande, the best.
Just saying it to spite me.
Just doing it to piss Nick off. But yeah, no, I am all in on all Christmas music right now. I'm trying to create my own playlist on Spotify, so I only get the hits. So
excellent.
I got about 27 songs saved so far. We'll see how that continues.
Yeah, I think I've listened to the Charlie Brown Vince Guaraldi trio album at least 20 times by now. It's just always like Christmas tree playing in my head this time of year, but like the jazzy version of it. It's a good way to live.
Yeah, man.
All right, man. Well, yes, it is. So yeah, we've got a heck of we've got some great guests coming up tonight that are part of one entity. And I realized too, where sometimes we delay saying who's on, that people are definitely already aware of who's on because they clicked on the episode if they're listening to this, unless maybe they click on it and like close their eyes or something. But yeah, so I'm excited to talk to these guys, and let's get into it. Alrighty, we have some special guests on tonight. We have a fellow podcasters and White Mountain legends. You guys are legends at this point. In the self-proclaimed Pavarotti of podcasts, SLASR podcast. Mike and Stomp.
Stomp is special, that's for sure, but not in the way you mean.
Yeah, I claim the Pavarotti because of the recent vocal exploits, but the podcast itself doesn't rise to the level of Pavarotti yet, I don't think.
How many downloads is that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Welcome on to the show, guys. I know we've discussed you guys a lot. We've talked about you and your show a lot. So it's great to finally have you guys on and talk. It's actually nice to talk to fellow podcasters too. That's kind of, you guys were locked and loaded, ready to go.
Yes, it's a small but mighty club, I guess.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, we have several different podcasts throughout the region that are doing the Lord's work here, spreading the good news about safe hiking and everything else. It's good to be part of the clique here.
Oh, that'd be such a good sticker if either of us had a sticker, and on the bottom it just says "Doing the Lord's work."
Maybe on the back of your pack, doing the Lord's work.
Is that too much? Is this too much if I wear this with a SLASR patch and this on the bottom of it? Oh gosh,
that's great. But yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So I mean, I'm sure a lot of our listeners know who you guys are, but do you guys want to introduce yourselves? I want to go. Just Stomp. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. My name is Stomp. I am the co-host of the Search and Rescue. Sounds like a Search and Rescue podcast, and I co-host this with Mike weekly. We've been doing this for 3 to 4 years now. I think we're creeping up on like 180 episodes.
Ooh.
I live in Thornton. I'm a physical therapist. I do some volunteer search and rescue on the side, and have 3 crazy cats and a crazy cat wife. And let's see. I think that's about. Oh, I do some dabbling in music, and yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.
A little jack of all trades, I guess.
Cool.
How'd you get the How'd you get the nickname Stomp?
Oh, Stomp Machine goes back like probably about 30 years now. It comes out of my roots in music and music production. I worked under that name, recording singer-songwriters and bands back in Massachusetts, down in Salem. And I actually had a studio in Salem, Massachusetts. It was like a 1,200 square foot studio, and I used to record in there, and it was under the name Stomp Machine. And then for our purposes, Mike and I decided it would be best if I just kept the pseudonym to try to keep my activities with SAR sort of separate and distinct. So we went with Stomp. Just
cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
pretty cool.
That was
Yeah,
cool.
and I never actually have acquired a cool trail name to use, so I just had to go with Mike.
Well, I think at one point we were talking about Microspike, remember?
We were talking about Microspike. There was another. I mean, Jimmy Chaga had a few good ones, but I've never really had a trail name that landed.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that has to be bestowed upon you too.
Yes.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but I'm Mike. Thanks for having me on. So what am I supposed to do? Introduce myself?
Yeah. Just
That would be
intros.
good.
Yeah.
All right. So it's so weird for me. Like usually I'm worried about the script and what the next question.
You're like, what do I do?
Yeah, I'm just showing up. It's fantastic. I love this. But anyway, yeah. So I'm one half of the Sounds Like a Search and Rescue podcast. So if you're not familiar with the podcast, our tagline is all things hiking and search and rescue in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. So yeah, we have this little podcast we've been doing for the last few years. Me and Stomp have known each other for a long time. I'll probably talk about how we met later, but we've been, hiking friends, and we had a little crew of friends that got together to do hiking over the years. And at some point, I always had a long commute, and I live in Amesbury, Mass. I work in Cambridge, so typically an hour and a half to 2 hour commute one way was not unusual for me, especially going home. So I listened to a lot of talk radio over the years, and I went through phases. I've always been a Howard Stern fan. I've always sort of been into sports radio, got into political talk a little bit over the years, back and forth, but mostly just like sort of talk radio, general sports stuff. And I always thought that like it would be cool to have a podcast that focused on information about the White Mountains and hiking. And I always had an interest in search and rescue. So there wasn't really anything out there. There was a couple of podcasts like that. The guy, Kyle Hates Hiking, he had Trail Tales, but I think that was a little bit like his schedule's a little, it's not consistent. So you never knew when things were coming out. So we had talked about just putting this podcast together. And yeah, we talked about it for probably 2 years. And then finally with COVID, we got it together, recorded a couple of shows. It was horrible. You guys probably know the deal. You do your first show, you don't have any timing, you're stepping all over each other. And we had to re-record a couple of times. And yeah, it took us probably 20 to 25 episodes to get our sort of timing and flow down. And ever since then, it's, I don't think every show is perfect, but we try to put out something that's interesting and entertaining. So,
Yeah. I mean, I think you guys are definitely succeeding with that, to say the least. But I definitely get what you mean too, where it's like it feels weird at first. Like even I'll say too, we're still we're not as used to it as you guys, but getting guests that we haven't met in person before, and then kind of meeting them over video. Like I feel like that's the whole vibe too, as well. Where it's been super easy with some people, and so not that we've had any bad guests, but the conversation flows easier sometimes with certain individuals than it does with other people, like we found.
Oh, sure. Have you guys had like in-person guests? Because that's a whole other world too. In-person is a different dynamic than streaming.
Yeah, we had
not people we haven't known though.
Actually,
like we've had my friend. Oh yeah, that's
Oh
true.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's been a couple people that I hadn't met before that have come here, but not that many by far and few. Like some of Josh's friends that came on, and though the in-person ones are always interesting too, where it's like I kind of try not to, like, I want to let people talk, but I'm like, can you please like talk into the microphone? Like we have the mic in front of you. Like we've had before where people like look away like that for a second, and you're like, good, can you
Oh,
speak
it
into the
happens. Yeah,
microphone?
yeah, yeah. Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of crazy
We-
because I've had some either they could be axe murderers or just really nice hikers. You just never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think more times than not,
Yeah, that's a little sketchy.
you can sort of feel as you start talking to people. So a lot of times, like Stomp does a lot of the work in getting guests, and we'll just pick basically interesting people, reach out to them, see if they want to come on. And we don't do a lot of prep. We'll give a script, and generally, I'd say like 95% of the time, the people are interesting. They do really well, and the conversation just flows. And that 5% of the time where we struggle a little bit, it's not that big of a deal. We can edit it out or make it work. So it's we're always appreciative of people that want to come on.
Yeah, I think,
So-
like you said before, you guys have figured out like your cadence. You figured out a lot of those things, and it's a lot of through the trial and errors of just kind of going and doing it. Like, I still think at times we're trying, instead of like to let conversation happen naturally, sometimes we're like, all right, we got to make sure we get these questions in so we keep this flowing, we keep it moving. We don't have to, like, we're not starving for content, or we're not using dead air or things like that to try to figure things out. And it is a lot of trial and error to get to that point that you guys have gotten to. You guys are doing great. You guys are crushing it.
Yeah, Stomp. Matter of fact, Stomp, you used to do that. Remember, you would like force dead air on me to make me uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's so funny. It's one of those editing decisions too, where should I leave that dead space in there or should I get rid of it? Yeah, dead air's a riot.
I'm with you, Mike.
Yeah, it could either fall in the
I'm with
comedic
you.
end
That dead
or
air kills
be
me.
really bad. But
That's funny.
It kills me, dead air. For some reason, I just am driven to like keep the conversation going. Like every second counts to me.
Well, I feel like a lot of times, like typically when we do an intro, like I know Josh is just gonna jump in before I do because I'll just sit there, and it's funny to watch you. Like I'm like, I wonder how long is he gonna wait before he says something to break up the silence. And usually it's something mundane, like you're talking about, like, oh, I'm wearing this fuzzy, comfy hoodie or something. I'm like,
so how do you guys divide up the chore of putting out a podcast? Like all the details in the background.
You flipping
I'm all
the
razzle.
question,
I'm all
flipping the
razzle
script,
dazzle.
flipping the script on us now. So it's funny too. So like a little bit, like I had some background at least in being able to mix music, nothing like Stomp producing music professionally, but tinkering by myself. So we had microphones and all this stuff, and it was a similar back and forth to cut it short, where Josh was like, oh, we should do a podcast. But generally I feel like I do pretty much all the mixing, editing. Josh is starting to throw together some YouTube videos that we throw up now that we've been recording it through StreamYard. And I feel like it's kind of a mix of in terms of it. I feel like we sort of found our way eventually to become more of a hiking podcast, probably because that's kind of one of my bigger hobbies and everything that I like and I'm pretty passionate about. But we definitely have like that's kind of where our slogan comes from, of like everything you talk about while hiking and sort of a podcast about hiking, to give us that free reign of like we can have random topics. Like we did like the Apple Music top 100 albums or whatever kind of episode where Josh had ideas for that. So I think it's a mix of like guests or maybe people I know that we've had, and then some topics that like we both find interesting. And I think we both have gotten better too. Like I feel like we used to not use notes at all, and we're kind of in the field after. I think it was kind of really after I probably went on the podcast on SLASR that time, and I saw sort of how Mike had a script, and I'm like, I feel like it could be helpful to just throw notes down every once in a while, especially if we're talking about, like, I was doing like the trip to Joshua Tree, stuff like that. I'm like, there's no way I could just recite all that off the top of my head, or it's going to sound rambly. So we try to organize a little bit, but I guess that's sort of how things are arranged in terms of how we put these out.
What Nick's trying to say is he does all the work and I just show up and talk.
No, you do work.
Yeah.
That's too funny. That's too funny.
So it's been a lot of fun for us. Like, this was not like you said before, Mike, you guys kind of had a general idea of what you guys wanted to do when we were starting this podcast. We kind of just were like, let's sit down in front of these mics and let's just have a conversation and see what happens and see if there's anything interesting that comes out of it. And we just did it. We just kept doing it until we kind of like found the groove that we're in now, which has been great. And yeah, it's still a lot of learning as we go along and seeing what works, what doesn't, and what resonates with people and what doesn't. So no, it's been great. And for you guys kind of started as like a, what were you guys, like a Facebook page?
Yeah,
or
it
was
was
the /?
Which I had
Yes.
nothing to do with. I mean,
Yeah.
I figured
Yeah.
we'd touch
So
upon that.
yeah. So our origin story, essentially, so Stomp and I had been friends. We met through a message board for rideshare for the Mount Washington road race. And we had become friends. I think we ran, it was either the 2011 or 2013 Mount Washington road race, one of those years. And I was not a hiker at that time, and I don't think Stomp was. I mean, Stomp had more hiking interest, but he wasn't into hiking as
yeah,
much.
it was dormant. Yeah.
It was dormant. So anyway, we became friends through the Mount Washington road race. And I think we did like 2 or 3 races. And then was probably around 2015 that I'd spent 5 years really on this mission to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And I had trained, I'd been injured multiple times, and it just wasn't working for me. I had hit the 20-mile mark in the Newport Marathon in 2 hours, 30 minutes. And I was like, guaranteed I'm going to qualify this year and it'll be great. And then 20 miles in, my calf blew up complete. I basically had to walk the last 6 miles. Took me an hour. So it's just crushing. So I basically came to the realization that like my body's just not built to run a qualifying time without getting injured. So I kept getting injured. So I was like, I got to find something else. So I remember Mount Washington. I thought it was cool being up there. So I decided to go hiking. My first hike was Glen Boulder to Mount Washington. I looked at a map and I was like, I'll just go up this Glen Boulder and get to Mount Washington and come down Tuckerman, which was a beast of a hike, but I was in pretty good shape back then.
Yeah.
So after that, I think I did like a winter overnight with some local friends of mine. We did Gray Knob and Adams. And then somehow I think me and Stomp had connected. I had done a solo hike on Mount Lafayette, and this is in like December. And then I think me and Stomp connected, and he had gotten into winter hiking or hiking somehow. And he had connected with a bunch of these people that were into hiking. So him and Jimmy Chaga, I met up with them. I'd never met Jimmy at the time. And then we went out and we did Glen Boulder to Isolation. And then Jimmy's girlfriend had done a car spot for us. So we went out Rocky Branch. It was an awesome day. The weather was amazing. So me and Stomp had kind of connected from the perspective of hiking at that point, where it had always been about running. And Stomp somehow had met this group of like people that were involved in this Facebook group, the Obnoxious Hikers, which I think people that are listening, like there's a bunch of these uncensored hiking groups. So the Obnoxious Hikers was one of these like uncensored groups that I think what was happening is that the moderators in one of the 4,000 footer groups was getting too heavy handed. And what ends up happening is when you have a heavy handed moderator, they will, suspend people or kick them out. So then people created this group called the Obnoxious Hikers, and somehow Stomp was involved in this group. And then as happens in these groups, the Obnoxious Hikers, I think there was some conflict amongst the members, and it was all about hiking basically, but like it was still like a lot of like disagreeable personalities. So they all sort of found their way out of the 4,000 footer group to the Obnoxious Hiker group. And then that group started fighting. And then there was another group called the Hiking Hooligans. And that's where Stomp was in this group. And it was like maybe a couple hundred people. And it's a lot of the common names that you'll see that have been around for a long time hiking in the white. So anyway, we got to know all those people. And then that group inevitably had conflict, because ultimately, like, this is a bunch of people that are high conflict personalities that like to hike. And I sort of, it was enjoyable and funny in the beginning. And, you're sort of in the situation, you feel like, oh, I'm within this group of people and they're like these awesome hikers. And you think like in terms of like you're somehow above other people, which you're really not. So I sort of stepped away from that, but I still kept in touch with a lot of those folks. And I decided to, during that time, I had become interested in search and rescue. There was an incident that had happened with a guy from my town who had been hiking with his sons. He had got split up from his sons on Mount Washington and had got lost on the Jewel Trail. And the news article that came out about that incident was that this person had been abandoned on the trail by his sons, and he had almost died. Basically, he had hypothermia, and they rescued him and found him. So I was always fascinated about search and rescue because of that. I was like, that's the craziest story ever, that your sons would leave you on a mountain to die. So I was fascinated about it. And then anytime a search and rescue event would come up, people would talk about how, like, oh, search and rescues are like so crazy right now and it's growing. And I was like, is it really growing? And I tried to find some data on it, because in my real life, I'm a data geek and I couldn't really find a lot of information about it. So I just started collecting news reports and I put them on a spreadsheet. And then I was like, I'll just collect this, and then I'll know at the end of the year how many search and rescues there are. So eventually I decided, I was like, I'm going to start. And we used to joke around. We'd be like, someone would post on one of the 4,000 footer groups and they'd say like, oh, I'm going to hike Mount Washington in January, but I've never hiked before. I'm going to go up Tuckerman. And we would joke around and say like, oh, it sounds like a search and rescue is going to happen. So I created this Facebook group called Sounds Like a Search and Rescue. And it was like, same group of people had sort of gravitated to it. But over time, I was kind of over the nonsense. And I was just more interested in using it as a place to sort of talk about search and rescue. But I also came from a mindset of, I don't want to be a babysitter online, and I'm not going to moderate or kick people out because that causes more conflict. Me being the naive idiot that I am, I was like, well, I can just basically tell people that they're responsible for their own behavior, and I'm not going to police people. And inevitably, like, that just doesn't work. And I wasn't willing to continue. I wasn't willing to be a police officer. So ultimately, like, the site got taken over by a bunch of people that had, they continually posted a bunch of nonsense that's not related to hiking. And then I said, what, I don't have time for this anymore. And it's not something I'm interested in. And then, we had started the podcast, and I had wanted to include search and rescue as part of the podcast. So ultimately that's why we decided to use that name. And it's more so become a hiking podcast, but we still keep the search and rescue, and we do want to talk about that quite a bit. But anyway, that's a long sort of origin story, but hopefully people find that interesting, and that's sort of the whole. I
think it's cool because I definitely remember when that group was like, people would tag it when you'd have a person be like, oh, like, should I hike Mount Washington tomorrow, and be like -55 wind chill and like supposed to be snowing, and like someone would throw up like a comment like, sounds like a search and rescue. Like I do remember seeing that on there a bit, but I was curious always how it came from sort of that moniker into the podcast and whatnot.
Yeah. And I think that there's a little bit, I've talked about this before, that it's a little embarrassing to me that I sort of put that mindset of thinking that one thing I've learned after talking to hundreds of people and thinking about this is like, there's absolutely, you could do everything right and still end up in a situation where you're in trouble. So to me, it's a little bit of an embarrassment that, I had that mindset previously around like, oh, this couldn't happen to me, and I can joke around about these things. And, I've talked to enough people now, and I've grown up enough over the years to sort of understand that it's not, most of the time when it comes to search and rescue situations, it's, there's no ill intent, and there are negligent situations, but in most cases, it's just bad luck.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah, I think you got, I mean, even in light of, some of the recent events, even like you guys have sort of covered the one behind Coppermine Coal that sort of just happened, that whole search and rescue. And then the one that's out in the Adirondacks with that young guy from Canada that actually got lost, that they haven't found him on Allen. But well prepared people. And I know it seems like it doesn't matter sometimes. I guess stuff sort of happens. You can be really prepared. And that's sort of just the unfortunate reality.
Yeah, I just have to clarify a little bit, though. Oftentimes at live events in particular, people will come up and say, thank you for your service, thinking that we're search and rescue. And that's the only problem that I've had with the name. It's like, no. We're a hiking podcast, hike safe podcast, and we touch upon search and rescue in the sense that you don't want to end up here at
Yeah.
this endpoint. So here's some
Mhm.
pointers and whatever else. It's just sort of a funny little takeaway.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm a private citizen, not involved in search and rescue. And we try to remind people of that as much as we can.
Oh yeah.
You guys do a really great job though highlighting the people that are in search and rescue. We talked about
Hell yeah.
talked about the live show obviously a little bit on our podcast that we joined you at Reckless, and when you talked just now about Mike how you were into stats. I'm like, yeah, no kidding. This guy brought his own projector screen and everything to go over his stats. I was like, this is awesome. This guy came prepared. But it's that stuff. It's really cool that you have that. You took that kind of initiative to do that, and you highlight the people that were there that were part of search and rescue teams, and just to give them the kudos that they might not get every day. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and I don't know, like, there's something about like an Excel spreadsheet to me that just is like, it's just magic. I just
You're one of
love
those people.
it. Yes, I love it.
No.
Yeah, and
It reminds me of the scene in Airplane with the pilot's telling his story to passengers on the plane, and they all want to kill themselves. It's one way or the other. You love it or you hate it.
I find the trends and stuff that you display with those really interesting. Like there's always, I feel like, some sort of interesting thing you wouldn't expect, and I always it's always interesting too to hear the people from which states and whatnot, and sort of the age groups. I mean, I feel like it's something you might guess, but I found it really cool that you kind of go into all those sort of little shades and sort of trends and whatnot.
Yeah, it validates things, you know, and I think that the anybody that hasn't listened to the SLASR podcast, I mean, there's a couple of data points that come out that I always talk about. One is that lower leg injuries are one of the most common types of incidents. So I always tell people, like, use a splint and a wrap, and bring a splint and a wrap and know how to use it, because chances are that that's the type of injury you're going to deal with. And if you can sort of triage yourself in the field and try to get out, you won't always be able to, but it's worth having it in your pack. And then the other one is obviously a headlamp, and having multiple headlamps. So many times people get in trouble without headlamps. Bring multiple headlamps so that you can hand one off to somebody if you run into them on trail. You'd be surprised at how many people just don't have the ability to time out when they're going to be returning to the car, and they get caught in the dark. So, and then the last big one for me is older men. You know, if you're 50, 55 plus, chances are, from a fatality perspective, eat healthy, but also from a fatality perspective, doesn't happen that often, but chances are it's going to be a heart attack or a stroke or some kind of medical issue for a 55-year old or older men. So get heart checkups and make sure you're healthy.
Or this is inside baseball, but the other day with Dave bushwhacking up to the Lost Pass, he had he's gonna kill me for this, but he had a hip adductor, so that's the muscle on the inner side of your thigh. So
no.
I come around a bend and I look at Dave, and he's literally doing like a half squat, like with his left leg way out 90 degrees to the left. I'm like, are you all right?
Oh man, that's awkward to come around a corner too. Sorry, Dave.
In the middle of nowhere. It's like, what's going on?
So watch out for men stretching.
Yes. But unfortunately,
that lower leg injury advice though is like that's huge, because I would imagine rolled ankles probably like got to be towards
Anybody,
like injuries that are happening on trail.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that hikes that knows this sort of, some crazy people wear boots in the summer, but most people wear like trail runners, and you'll be going along and having a great day, and all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, like you're not paying attention, and you just like twist your ankle, and then it's that moment that's like that 10-second moment where you're like, all right, is this just a little tweak?
Like how bad? How bad is it?
Yeah.
Right,
the sharp twinge.
Yep.
So with the podcast, I know like you talked a little bit about the origins and how you guys met, but how did the conversation start back and forth that you guys actually wanted to start a podcast? Like, was it sort of a joke thing, like with me and Josh, where you're like, you know what, we should start a podcast, and then you kind of start thinking about it, and how did it happen?
So it was at the Woodpecker restaurant.
Right.
And
circa what year was that? Basically, I mean, it had to be We started recording in 2021, so you're saying like 2019 we started chatting about this
Something
before
like
COVID.
that, yeah. I
Yeah.
think we had hiked Tecumseh, right? Because I had done that. It was that day I did Moosalak. So I had hiked Mount Moosalak the morning, and I had it had snowed that day. It was like August 29th. And there was a through hiker that came through, and I had to give him my jacket because they
Oh,
came
wow.
over the moose, and it had snowed on them, and they had nothing. And then I met Stomp that I went to Black Mountain Burger, and then I met Stomp, and we hiked Tecumseh, and then we went to Woodpecker Restaurant. That's where Mrs. Stomp was working at the time. So Stomp was drinking Mai Tais. I think I probably had a beer or something. Or maybe I wasn't. I probably wasn't drinking at that time. I was probably had a Sprite. And we just talked it out, and then nothing happened for 2 years. Stomp.
Yeah, that's
we
when
kept
COVID
talking
kicked
about it,
in.
and Stomp would nudge me, and then I would like build the script, and I had a script sitting in my Google Doc for like a year, and he would nudge me, and then finally, we did it. And I remember hitting record, and then I remember we both just started talking at each other, and then I was like, "I'll stop," and he's like, "I'll stop," and we just would like talking. It was horrendous. And then I listened to it. I was like, "We cannot release this. This is horrible. We have to record again."
Yeah, it's funny. So the Woodpecker Studio was named after woodpeckers, which is now Bergie Seafood at the corner of 175 and Route 49 in Campton. And Mrs. Stomp and I went in there recently just to get some seafood, and it's like really great fresh stuff, but it's like just ghosts of the old building. And it was a nice place to hang out and get food and chat after hikes. I mean, I remember many times just hanging out with hikers like Jimmy Chaga and Casey and many others after the fact. So that became sort of the joke about, the Woodpecker Studio. There is no Woodpecker Studio. It's just, It's funny.
And I had actually got that. I think I had come up with that idea. I think you were kind of like, what? So I had listened to some other podcast, and there was this podcast that I listened to about Disney World. And they were like, it was like, it's 4 gay guys that just talk about Disney World. And it's like it was the most entertaining podcast you could imagine. I don't know why, but they did it out of this guy's house, but they called the studio. They named the studio after one of the co-hosts that had died. And I was like, that's such a cool, and I didn't realize I thought they were really in a studio, but then I saw it on video, and I was like, oh, they're just in their house. So I was like, we have to name the studio so that it projects this idea that we're like a professional organization. And Stomp, I think people have reached out and been like, oh, can we record in your studio or something? So.
Well, that's funny because whenever guests come over, I think they're anticipating this, like, RKO, Rockefeller Center type of studio, and they come into, which was previously the basement. Now they're just upstairs. So it is really funny. Now
they get cats crawling all over the place. What is happening?
It's all a facade.
If you're a cat person, it's fantastic. I've enjoyed it so far. But yeah, definite cats.
Yeah.
Nick's,
we're looking to give away 3
Black
if you
Cat
need
Studios, not much different.
Yeah, we just came up with that moniker because I have 2 black cats, and frequently one of them would be in here when we were actually first recording in person. Usually the older one, for some reason, she likes to be in the room when we'd be on, but inevitably she'd come up to me and start clawing my lap because she wanted to get out, and then you got to let her out, and it was like a whole thing. So that's where the Black Cat Studios came from.
Yeah, that's awesome.
When did it kind of hit you guys that oh, we are people are actually tuning in and then listening to us on a weekly basis?
I don't know. I think it hit me because I was running the IG Instagram thing, and I would see some numbers, and then we use a podcast host, and they update numbers regularly. I think when it hit, what was it, Mike? 100,000?
Something like
100,000 was a big deal.
That's a lot of downloads.
Yeah. So there were a couple markers, even 100 followers was huge, and we're like, wait a minute, there's actually people listening. But then when it started hitting the bigger numbers, whoa, what the heck? But it happened fairly early on.
Yeah, and I think that I never really to me, I feel like we had that guy, I forget his name, Stomp, I have to look him up, but we had this guy who's the go-to expert for Mount or like the Himalayas and like high mountaineering. I forget his name, but you had landed
Arnett?
him. Yeah,
Arnett?
yeah. And I had felt like super nervous about that because
Oh
I
yeah.
just didn't want to I wanted to look professional and I didn't want to come off looking like a moron. And it was a bit of a stretch. I think we had some other guests like Ty coming in. I think that I was like stressed about that one too. And I think that once we got through those, it wasn't even a matter of like thinking like, oh, well, listeners, I didn't really care about. Like, if people listen, that's great. But, we do this as a passion project and hopefully as a legacy. But I think just getting through those and feeling like, okay, well, those came off professional and there's something that I can be reasonably proud of. That was where, to me, I was like, all right, we were onto something here, and the listeners and the all that stuff will follow.
Mm. Well, I think the first live show too was a big turning point too. I mean, Reckless was so gracious, and they were.
Was that last year? Was your first live show that you guys did, or is this a couple of years even before that?
No, we had if I remember correctly, we had like a 100th episode live show, which was sort of the first full conditions, like impromptu full conditions thing where Ty came in. Does that serve me right, Mike? I think that's how it happened. And it was just Mike, myself, and Ty, where you, Nick, were standing playing guitar. We were just standing up talking to this audience of, I don't know, 100, 150 people. That was a big moment too. So that was sort of a combination of several different aspects of this whole community, the podcast, and then Ty's efforts and Reckless's efforts. They're great in terms of supporting search and rescue and just all that stuff. So that was a big time. And I believe that was around 100 episodes and full conditions.
You guys, is it like weird to you still that like you started this thing and now you go out in public and people kind of recognize you or recognize your podcast? Do you guys find that weird? Or when I was at the live show and people came up to me and were like, are you the Josh? And I'm like, I'm a Josh. I don't know about the Josh, but I am a Josh. But it was cool to meet people that like appreciated what we do and the conversation that we have and are being entertained by the things that we're doing. Like, do you guys still, because you've been doing it for longer than we have, much longer than we have, and you guys are very successful. Is it still something that you're like, wow, this is kind of cool?
I think I mean, it's always nice to be appreciated and meet people, but I think for me, like I just think of like the times where I've actually run into people that connected through the show. Like I think of like, you guys have become friends, and I've gone hiking with Nick so many times now. And like the funniest thing I sort of think of is like Nick and I have this friend, Steve from the Cape. His Instagram is Steve Eats Shit. And I'll never forget like getting out of my car and I was doing a solo hike on the Carters. And I knew it was going to be a beast of a hike. I mean, that is in the winter, the Carters are like, for people that grid even, like they'll talk about it and they'll say like, the middle and South Carter, especially if you put Carter Dome in there, it's a beast of a hike. And I was going solo and I knew that it was going to be like, I think we had to break trail. And I pull up in the parking lot and Steve is there and he looks over to me and he's like, are you Mike? And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm Mike from from the SLASR podcast. And he's like, oh, I listen to the show. And I was like, all right, well, what are you doing? And he's doing the same route as me. So we decided to just hike together. And I sort of joked with him and I was like, well, you're not a serial killer, are you? And we even joke now, like we've hiked so many times since then. And I always joke with him and I go like, oh, you're sure you're not a serial killer? And he's like, I'm playing the long game, like Nick knows, like Steve is just like the funniest guy. And, I can't tell you how many times that between him and Peter and Jake and, Dave and all the crew from Alzheimer's and the crew from Emily's Hike and everybody, like that's to me is what's awesome. Is I was always a solo hiker. Every once in a while, like Stomp would come along or like Jamie or Casey or whatever. But for the most part, I was always a solo hiker. And through getting to know people, that's where I've learned to become like a more social person and enjoy hiking in groups. So to me, That's the bigger deal than like, somebody randomly recognizing it. That's kind of cool though, especially when my daughter's around with me. I love that. I love being like, see, somebody listens to the show.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
is cool.
I don't run
so
into
you started the podcast so you can make friends.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's a thing. Like people, it's harder to make friends when you're older. It
I'm his
is.
only
So,
friend.
yeah, so it is hard to make friends when you're older. So start a podcast. I
true.
mean, that's the way to do it.
It's so true.
That's funny.
I'm sorry, stop. I interrupted you.
No, it's all good. Yeah, I don't. I think for the most part, in terms of like the recognition or I hate the word celebrity or whatever. I guess there's maybe a small part of that, but for the most part, it has been a level of appreciation by people that I've met on trail consistently. It's just thanks for what you guys are doing. I think you're making an impact in terms of awareness and just hiking safely and avoiding being a subject or a victim for search and rescue. So it's been a level of appreciation, but I have not run into like any weird hyper fans or anything like that. I don't know if they exist. I hope they don't, but so far it's just been very cool. And to add to what Mike said, everybody that we've met through this has just been phenomenal. Just wonderful to be on trail with, and it's been great.
Just imagining you crossing some super fan that has like their face tattooed on your shoulder or something.
I don't know. I don't think there are any out there. I mean, honestly, I don't think so. I hope not.
Have a slasher logo tattooed on them. Be like, I love you,
but
guys.
I'll just add this though, and this is me in the confessional. Mike and I talk about this a lot, and we set the show up to try to keep search and rescue, my endeavors with search and rescue, separate from the pod. And I think we're at a place now where it's fairly healthy and comfortable, and people recognize that it's a hiking podcast. We touch upon search and rescue to a degree, but for me, there is some crossover into the search and rescue community, which we've tried to mitigate as much as possible. At least I have. And for the most part, at this point, I think it's okay and it's healthy. Like just the other day, I was at Granite State Glass in Plymouth getting my windshield fixed, and a fish and game officer came in, and I'm like, "Hey, how you doing? I haven't seen you on trail forever," and blah blah blah. And on his way out, he leans over and goes, "So I've been listening to this podcast." And he looks at me with that sly grin, and I'm like, "Oh my god!" So it's another person discovered it. So it's a little awkward for me being in search and rescue, trying to find the balance with all this stuff. But I think it's panning out to be a healthy positive. Yeah. So yeah, that was a funny moment. And then of course he was like, "Yeah," and then my commanding officer was like, "You know who that is, right?" So it's weird. It's just some of the weird dynamics that we have to balance out there. But hey, hopefully we're making a positive good for the community.
No, I don't think it's pretty unquestionable. I think you guys are making a positive impact. I mean, just to your point, there's just not that many really hiking Northeast podcasts. Like I think there's like the 46 of 46 one. There's Warden's Watch. I know there's a couple that are Northeast based, but when you think of how big the hiking community is and the popularity, especially close to like some pretty big urban centers like Boston and New York City or Albany or things like that, like there's really not a ton of hiking podcasts out there. So I think it's cool, like especially when you guys get into things like I remember like I think one of the first episodes I saw with you guys when I started listening was like you did like a winter gear review, and I'm like, that's so cool, especially as someone that's getting newer. I was getting newer into hiking at winter at that time, and it's like it's a pretty niche topic. And it was cool that you guys, or to see someone, I'm like, oh, like there's people who actually are talking about this and know what they're talking about and stuff.
I think you have to separate it though. There's the podcast community, which is strictly audio, but then there's a really vibrant video community out there on different platforms, but namely YouTube, and their numbers are exploding. So what we're doing in terms of audio only is a whole separate niche with different numbers and dynamics.
Yeah, that's a valid point. There are a ton. I mean, I know a couple different YouTubers, like when I first started really getting into hiking the whites, where like I'd be looking at videos of certain hikes or whatever to sort of get, I guess, the vibe of like what I was kind of getting myself into. But I think you guys do a great job at, again, you're saying towing that line sort of deal, but also really promoting good hiking practices and safety and stuff. And it's like, it's one of those things where I like to bring it, not to bring it back to Facebook, but you'll see like a new hiker on those Facebook groups. And I feel like it is tough sometimes to go online for people, because sometimes people sort of get shredded as being like stupid and you're just new and maybe you're trying to ask a general question. It's nice to have a podcast where you can just throw it on. Like these guys are just kind of hashing out topics about this and you don't have to, like, it to me, it's just a different way that's really accepting and very accessible to people to kind of get information on hiking in the whites. Because I feel like it can be intense sometimes on the socials, to say the least.
Yeah. I think the YouTube thing is cutthroat too. I think that's a hard task. I think audio is a hell of a lot easier. Maybe not.
Video stuff, you almost have to like keep feeding the beast. It's not enough just to do like one or a couple videos. You got to keep that beast fed.
No,
Yeah,
100%.
we have a face for podcasting too.
That's what we say.
Oh man, if people knew how handsome we were, Mike,
Yes.
holy shit.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know.
sorry, is this PG-13?
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, YouTube stuff. I mean, I talk about it a little bit on here sometimes, but I do some like videos and stuff. But it does seem like it also seems totally random what people find interesting sometimes. Where it's, I think a lot of it's taglines between like the most terrifying hike up, blah blah blah, and that like wins in. I'm sure it carries into even podcast videos too, where it's like you need sort of that dramatic, clickable headline that's going to get someone into the episode for the first time if they're displaying it. But like you said, very cutthroat, I think is a good word, is like I see it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it's the numbers game, it's the click game. I for the most part, I don't think slashers fallen into the trap of like number seeking. I speaking for myself and probably for Mike as well, I think it's just like it's the labor of love.
Yeah.
It's great to see it being recognized and listened to, which is super cool. I mean, recently we would just monetize, which is Bizarro. That's Bizarro World.
Ooh, congratulations.
Hey, congrats.
Well, yeah, it's like a congratulations and condolences too, because people, nobody wants to listen to an ad, but it does support what we're doing. And it's interesting. It's a mark of progress and progression, I suppose. But it's part of the whole podcast culture. But it's weird. I don't know. Yeah, it's like.
Yeah.
How does that work too? Like,
we're not trying to make a living off of it.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. Is it the distributor that ends up monetizing that, or how does that? Not to get too into the weeds on it, but how does that work? Did they just like send you get an email from somebody and they're like, "Hey, we're monetizing you guys now," or?
Mike might know better than I, but I would assume that it's a very complicated contractual process between multiple hosts, and it jumps outside of our host, and it seems to be standardized between multiple hosts at this point. So they take our file and who knows? It's weird.
Yeah, they just insert some random ads in the front and the end of it. So, and it's funny, but like I don't think we need necessarily money, but then every time, like we'll have to buy equipment, and Stomp will buy something, and then I'll always be like, well, that'll be the end of it, and then we got to buy stickers, and we got to buy patches or whatever, and it's like a never-ending type of thing. So having a little bit of money, so
it's feeding
in the
itself.
bank is helpful.
Yeah, that's essentially what it's doing. It's keeping it afloat.
Yeah. Do you feel like an
but
extra
Mr.
added
Stomp,
pressure to keep it fresh?
Mrs. Stomp wants to see some cash rolling in.
Yeah, right. She's like, if I'm gonna lose you every Thursday night, you better make some money.
Yeah, she's like, when are you guys gonna start making money?
Do you really need that studio room up there?
Right. Sorry to interrupt you. That's funny.
No, it was all right. I guess that was my question. Is just, do you guys feel like a little added pressure now that there is some monetization happening? You feel like you have to keep it fresh, and like you're working for the man now?
I don't know. Like, I feel like we did have a period where, so definitely, I mean, there's no pressure on the money piece of it, but like there was a period where I feel like, we ran out of ideas, but like what ends up happening is like me and Stomp will sit down. Like I feel like Stomp will sit down over a weekend and he'll just crunch out like, I'm going to bang out ideas for the next 10, 15 episodes. And then I'll end up filling in the holes with like a history segment, or like I read a lot of the Appalachia journals from like the 1900s and like history books. And then Stomp knows a bunch of cool people. So it's sort of, I don't know, creatively, I never really did anything creatively. I feel like in a band situation, like you guys probably, Nick and Stomp, you know more about this, but I feel like there's conflicts, but I never really had any conflicts with Stomp. It just works.
Yeah, it's a nice balance.
Yeah, and he's got like the guest ideas, and then I'll fill in the holes with like history segments or like hiking topics or whatever, and then Stomp will come up with some good safety topics. So it's, I don't know, we just haven't had any problem finding ideas.
And I actually enjoy just you and I just chewing the fat, as opposed to even having guests. It's super cool and chill.
Yeah, we haven't done that in a while. We're doing that on Wednesday night, which will be nice.
Yeah, it must be just way easier from that standpoint too, because you're like just showing up. You guys know each other so well, and you podcasted so many episodes. It must just be like, oh yeah, we'll just go on and bang this one out. We don't have to worry about a flow or anything like that.
Yeah, and like most of the guests are fine and they fit right in, and but you always worry about that.
The hardest part would be the logistics, the internet. We've had some funny guests where they're walking around outside in 20-degree weather with their cell phone talking to us, and they jump in their car to warm up, and they're like, I'm going to disconnect and drive to my mom's and reconnect, and I'll see you guys in a little while. It's just funny stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or like you guys, like the tree falls down and you guys lose power.
Yeah, we mentioned in the beginning of this episode, but I literally lost power when we were supposed to originally record this, so that was a fun thing. Yeah, it is interesting. We're even to throw it to like one of our guests we had on didn't have great internet, and I realized that getting their audio file from StreamYard, that they actually X'd out of it, and it was like 20% uploaded. Luckily, StreamYard's smart enough where it'll actually, you can go to a page and it, like he was doing it on his phone, and it'll just basically, it's intelligent, it finds it on your device and uploads it. But it's still, even then, it just took a while because the internet wherever they were, like in Western New Hampshire, just was not fantastic. But I was like really like, oh man, I hope we can get this file back, because that was like 2 hours, and it'd be really awkward to have to be like, hey, so I should have told you to stay in this window until it was uploaded. But yeah, the logistics sometimes can be interesting, and also just trusting that the software actually works and does what it's supposed to all the time. Yeah,
true.
It's fun. So you guys want to talk about your hiking? I mean, I would say we talked about sort of, I guess, backgrounds getting into hiking a little bit. But I guess what you're hiking now, I know Stomp, I know you do a lot of bushwhacking and working on the New Hampshire 500 highest, which I don't think we've even mentioned on this podcast yet.
We have not.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I tend to gravitate more towards the more remote puzzles, I guess. That's what I love about bushwhacking. It's always a puzzle, as opposed to just jumping on a trail where you know the end point and you just got to pay attention to the blazes. For the most part, I love a puzzle that you have to figure out, and sometimes the puzzle says not going to happen today. So yeah, I'm more of a bushwhacker. The 500 highest is essentially based upon a 200-foot prominence. And for New Hampshire, there's a list. There were a couple lists, but one list is 500 of those peaks that have at least 200 feet. So you may be talking about like a teeny hill in southern New Hampshire, or like a sub peak way the hell up north on the border of Canada. So yeah, that's fun stuff.
So that's like I was just going to say the 200-foot of prominence. So that's literally any elevation. So like it could be like a 200-foot hill off 0 feet or like sea level, and it counts by that.
100%.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah,
the summit cone would be 200 feet.
Okay. Gotcha.
And I think that's the AMC rule, right, Mike? For a summit for the 4,000 footers. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I guess that's sort of standard one.
Yeah. That's why Boot Spur is it's not considered 4,000 footer.
And two, with the 500 highest, I was curious, is that in like include the 48 in there too, or is it peaks outside of so they're all like in there as well?
Yep. The 48 are the first
question, but
first list, like the highest to lowest.
Yeah.
I have a list on Caltopo, which I could give you guys if you want it. That's somebody made of all the 500, and you open it up and it's like red dots for each one of them. And I think Dave uses them as well. But yeah, the 48 are the first portion of that list.
Cool. And you had to, I think I know both of you had done your 48, right? And I know Mike finished, I think his winter 48 last year. I don't know if you guys gone. I know you've done both, kind of delve in the list a little bit, but I don't know if you either can go.
I'm more the list chaser. Well, Stomp and Mrs. Stomp had gone after the 4,000 footer list
Okay.
and he'd finished that. But yeah, I had started, I think somewhere around 2018, I had decided like, all right, yeah, I'm going to do the 4,000 footer list. And I kind of like on the way did some 52 with the views. And then I think and I had always been into winter hiking. So my friend Jonathan, who I met doing triathlons in town where I live in Amesbury, he had taught me winter hiking. And so I had been a year-round hiker. It took me a while to get, I think in 2000 and I don't know, like it was like 2 years before I finished my 4,000 footer, I had actually done my 47th hike on Womback. And I was like, well, I'm probably going to finish next week. And then I looked at my 52 with a view and my terrifying 25. And I was looking at those lists and I said, well, I have like 10 or 12 of the 52 with a view. And I have like maybe 6 or 7 of the terrifying 25. And then I was thinking like, all right, well, Cannon is my last one for the 4,000 footer. So then I looked and I was like, well, I could actually finish. Originally, I was like, I could do Welsh Sticky, which is I could finish my 52 with a view on Welsh Sticky. Then I could go over to Cannon and then I could go up the Flume Slide and just like I'll drive
That's cool.
and finish all 3 lists in one day. And then I think somebody had given me the idea in one of these Facebook groups because I had talked about it. And I realized like I could use Mount Pemigewasset as my 52 with a view finish and then I could hike Mount Pemigewasset and then I could go up the that like road that bike path to connect to the Flume Slide, and that would be my terrifying 25 finish. And then I could come down Liberty Springs and then connect on the bike path across to I forget what trail it is to get up to Cannon.
Kinsman Ridge.
Ridge, yeah.
High Cannon.
High Cannon. That's what it was. It was High Cannon, the ladders.
Okay.
And then come down. And yeah, so I did that. So basically then I put a hold in my 4,000 footer list for like 2 years to finish the 52 with a view, which honestly, like to me, the 52 with a view is where I fell in love with New Hampshire because it gets you a little bit, gets you a little bit away from the core of the White Mountains. You get into Evans Notch a little bit and you get up to the north and you get to Nash Stream. And, I really sort of learned to fall in love with New Hampshire through the 52 with a view list. And then the terrifying 25 is the same way. It expands a little bit more. Then you're getting into the Ice Gulch and you're getting into some other cool hikes that get you into all the ravines where you get deeper into these wilderness areas. So I was able to get to 24 in my terrifying 25, 51 in the 52 with a view. And then I had 47 and then I did that finish hike. And then right after that, I decided like, well, now what's next for me? I'm going to do the winter 4,000 footers. And I finished that last year. And now I'm really just working to help any of my friends that want to do the winter 4,000 footer do that. And then I will help my daughter get her 4,000 footer list. And in between that, I just look to do fun stuff. And I like to spend a lot of time in Evans Notch because that's close to where my father-in-law lives in Maine. And then I also like a lot of stuff in Western Maine, like Pleasant Mountain, Burnt Meadow, Cutler Mountain. Those areas in Western Maine are really cool. And then, I get Chicora and Moat Mountain. Anything close to my father-in-law, I usually get over to.
Cool. Yeah, I was gonna ask like what's kind of your favorite sort of frequented hikes. I know you get a bunch over there in Waterville Valley too in that area. Stomp. It's funny, like that's one of those I'm starting to appreciate a little bit more. Where like a friend of the podcast, Mike Trokey, dragged me out to like Snows like last spring. We did like Tecumseh and then over there, and I'm like, there's a really beautiful trail system like Cascade Path, and I'm sure there's a bunch more. But I don't know if you wanted to mention some of your faves over there that you like to get out to.
Yeah, I mean, but first I'll just mention that I remember that High Cannon thing because I'm working on a different list called the terrifying trailhead parking lot list, and I had to park at Lafayette Campground to try to get a spot while Mike was coming down Flume Slide with Nobby. It was terrifying trying to get a spot in there. So that's a whole other list we can talk about. But Waterville's super cool, and I think the magic of Waterville is that it taps into the Sandwich Range, which I think all of us can agree it's like this magical, maybe somewhat creepy wilderness, and it's somewhat untapped and maybe a little rough around the edges. There's so much.
Just Passaconaway is crazy. There's a weird vibe on Passaconaway. I always feel like going up to that mountain, like those woods and stuff down there. It's very New England-esque and very pretty. That whole Wanalancet area, but it's got a vibe to it. It's funny. I feel like I know you guys reflect upon it on the podcast, but I got that vibe even before, back in like summer, I don't know, 2016, before I ever listened to you guys kind of about that, doing that with my wife. So that's an interesting area. I love the tri-pyramids and that whole, like, I did the Kate Sleeper Trail this summer, and that kind of blew me away. That was like a very nice area of New Hampshire wilderness. And also, yeah. And we were both like, I was with my friend Paul, who has hiked with Mike too and stuff. And we were in there, and I'm like, I feel like this is like prime moose territory, and I really want to see a moose, but it's also so narrow and vegetated in there that I feel like there's literally nowhere you could go if there's a moose. Like, you just have to backtrack on the trail and let it probably do its thing and sort of move on. But very, very beautiful area in there.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because there was a couple of years back, there was a moose that had fallen down North Tri Slide and died, and it was just rotting and you could smell it about a quarter mile away before you even got to the base of the slide. You can imagine. I mean, that's like a 65-degree angle. There's the dead moose at the bottom there. But but just briefly, I mean, 49 is great. Route 49 is great because you have Welch Dickey sort of at the southern end of it. And to the east, you have the Sleepers. You've got the Flat Mountain Range, Whiteface Passaconaway for sure. But then you can go west and dive into Tripoli or Livermore or Greeley North. I mean, it's a huge access point and a beautiful spot. And that's why I'm sort of reluctant to ever leave the area and go wherever. Like, oh man, I want to drive 2 hours or whatever to get to what I can do here. You get spoiled.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why Stomp and I don't hike that often, is because in the summertime, I'll be like, oh, I'm going over to Evans Notch, and he's like, well, it's going to be an hour and a half ride for me when I'm sitting right here on top of Waterville Valley. And then I'm the same way. Like, I love Stomp, but I'm not driving an hour and a half when I can go hike the Moats or I can hike Ball's Base.
Yeah, we met halfway for the Squam Traverse. I think that was the last one, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good time though.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, it's funny how it must be like you get
Valley area.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but you get used to, I guess, what you have. So it's kind of like, why go out my back door when I can get views, sort of, or why drive far when I can go out my back door and kind of get something with views on it, and a lot of variety of terrain, from like the ledges to, you got some steep areas and whatnot too.
Yeah, and it works for the podcast because it opens it up a little bit. Like, I'm always talking about the North Conway area, and then Stomp's talking about Waterville and Lincoln, and it works out well.
Yeah, and I can drive 40 minutes south and hit Gunstock, and to be honest with you, that Gunstock range, and I forget the name of the other areas around there, but you get a
Belknaps. Is that all the?
The western side of the Belknaps with Gunstock, and what is it? I forget the name of that peak, but anyway, it's no, that's the eastern side, but the other side that you and I did in the winter, and I was bonking out
Row and in Piper and all that stuff.
Piper, yeah. I mean, those are some incredible hikes. You really got to commit to those. They're not easy.
Yeah.
Dead air.
It's fine. I was gonna say, I feel like Josh was gonna say something earlier. That's why I was waiting to see if he was gonna say it.
No.
Okay.
No, I just said I love Waterville Valley. I go there every New Year's. We go to Waterville Valley.
So Josh, I have a question for you. So you're hanging around with all these hikers, and I know you get out a little bit, and I saw you got up to I think it was like Middle Sugarloaf or something like that. Like, what do we got to do to get the bug to bite you where you become obsessed and you're like, I'm going to do the 4,000 footer list?
Ooh.
That's a good
Oh.
question.
Uh,
Grab my popcorn.
I don't know. I really don't. I mean, maybe if I do it more, I might be more of a thing that I'm very smitten by, I guess. But I don't know. I really enjoy the finer things in life.
So he started the list too. So we actually went up. It was right before you guys got married, I think, right? You and your wife Mel. We went up together, but we did Franconia Ridge together back in the day, as it was around Labor Day weekend. I remember that one because that was the time that's the last time I ever used a water bladder, because we got like halfway up Falling Waters, and I'm like, why is my backpack wet? It was like a September day, and my water bladder had punctured, so that was fun. Haven't used one since, but yeah, you've been on your way, but it was fun to get out. I mean, what do you think of Middle and North Sugarloaf and stuff like?
No, it was good. It was good. I think the hard time for me is I just have a hard time finding free time, I guess is the way that I put it. I always have. I got 2 young kids. I got a very not physically demanding, but demanding job that takes a lot of my time. So when it comes time for the weekend, it's family time for me right now. My daughter's 10 months old. My son's 6, so it's like,
you're in the heat of it.
A lot of that.
Yeah, you're in prime time.
Exactly.
And honestly, like if it was, I mean, I would have been in the same situation if it wasn't for, Nana and Papa having the place up in Maine. And, even then I was like, all right, I'm leaving at 3 a.m. and I'll be back at like 11 a.m. so that I can help with the kids. So it was, but yeah, it is tough when you're when the kids are that age. But we will hold space for you. Do you guys heard that saying? We're holding space. That's apparently like a big thing right now. We're going to hold space for you in the mountains, Josh, and you'll get there eventually, because the kids are going to get older and they're going to be like, I don't want to hang out with Dad. He's a loser. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And you'll come up to the mountains with us.
You know what worked for me was
that's it.
marital tension. That's what worked for me when my marriages were going south. I was out there cranking it.
Yes, well, that's another thing. That's another system. That's a little costly, but that's an expensive way to get free time. But you could try that.
Plenty of trail time, though. Yeah, it's great.
It's a great motivator, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
This is. I was gonna say, this is like a random tangential thing, but it made me think, because I feel like this is a couple times I've been talking to Mike, and like you're at the age where, because your daughters are like in the current vernacular of what's hip in those words, like those things. Like me and Josh are falling behind on that thing of like we say, like you're like the people that are your age that have kids that are more in that age group now are actually more hip to some degree than we are. Like there was something like someone said to me the other day at work, and I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Like I've never heard them like, am I getting older and we're out of the vernacular now?
Well, I think what happens too is that the TikTok algorithm, like somehow it knows that you're connected to your family, and I think it feeds me the same content that they're consuming, and then we have like a family group chat where we're just sharing stuff, and so I keep up on all the hip stuff that the youngsters are worried about.
That's fantastic.
And you are pretty hip, Mike.
Well, I don't know about that, but.
But if you guys do invite me, I will definitely I will effort in making it to the hike.
All right. Well,
what have you hiked so far?
I've done Franconia. I did Monadnock when I was younger. I did the Sugarloafs, Willard.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
you need like a good overnight. Okay, you need a good overnight on something like the Percy Peaks or something. Just like something accessible but mind-blowing.
We'll have to pull something together and get you.
I can do mind-blowing. I'm down for mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing's always good. It's always good.
That's 60s vernacular. I'm like talking like my dad.
I grew up. I listen. Just listening to you, Mike. It sounds like you are a lot into different sports and things like that, and staying active in a different way when you were younger. And I grew up in all kinds of team sports. So basketball, baseball, football, all that stuff. I coached college basketball for 5 years, So that is like my activity was always driven by sport in the sense of like competitive sport. What's the score, all that stuff. So hiking to me is always just like a chore. It was always just like I have to just do this walk so I can get to the top and go back down. Like, so it's a lot of changing the mindset of like what it means to be active and to be chasing a goal in a different way.
Yeah, and I came from a sports background, so it's funny. Like you're a team sports guy. I was the opposite. Like I never liked team sports. I always liked the individual sport. So I was always doing track, and wrestling was my big sport. And I did golf, and any type of running. So I got into running when I got a little bit older, and I actually coached wrestling for a number of years, and then I got into officiating. So I was a high school wrestling ref for like 10 years, and
Wow.
That was sort of how I got my sort of, I guess, kick for competition and things like that, was just being on the mat. But then from a time perspective, that didn't work when I had 3 kids and being
Right.
away. So I had to stop doing that. But I think that eventually, like I got over the competitive aspect. And then although I do feel like hiking to me was competitive for a long time. I was competing for myself to just get these lists done and try to do it in like a fast way, like try to hike, like, I could do Mount Washington in 2.5 hours and I could pat myself in the back. But those days I could care less at this point. I'm more about, let's try to find some cool friends to hike with. Let's take a lot of breaks. Let's build some memories and go from there. So I guess that just comes with age.
That's cool. So I think it's interesting. So a lot of times you guys ask guests on your podcast, like what's sort of the hairiest situation maybe you've gotten yourself into hiking. I was going to ask you guys, like what's sort of maybe the craziest situations like you've experienced sort of in your hiking careers, and maybe a time that like you weren't making, like I don't think I've even talked about on this podcast before, but I hiked Ash with Adams our first time, like in the fog in like October and freezing rain. And that's a time I look back on in our hiking career that I'm like, we shouldn't have gone up there. Like we made it out fine. We had layers, but we were in over our heads for sure. We hadn't hiked in the Northern Prezzies before, and visibility was bad. But that was one mistake that I made sort of early on. So I don't know if you guys had any stories from your hiking careers.
You want me to go, Stomp? All right. So I've told the story about like the overnight on Mount Carrigain, where one of my friends got hypothermic, and we had to bring him back from severe hypothermia with hot liquid. So you can listen to other episodes, and you just do a search in the SLASR podcast for that story. Just do hypothermia, and you'll find it. But I would say honestly, like one of the most now looking back at it with a little bit more of a sober view, I would say one of the sketchiest things I did that I actually can't believe I did is I used to take the kids hiking on my own. So I had my 3 kids, and then I had my niece and nephew. So there's 5 of them. And every once in a while I would take the kids hiking and give my wife and my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law like a free afternoon. So I think they would go to like Settlers Green in North Conway, and then I would take the kids hiking. And a lot of times it was like Echo Lake, or I would drive them up to Cathedral Ledge, or I would take them to the river in Bartlett or whatever. But one day I decided I was going to take them to Cave Mountain. I had taken the kids up to Cave Mountain previously, and it was fine. I had my wife with me. And so I decided I had to pack the 5 kids in the car. We drove to Bartlett. If you get to Cave Mountain, it's basically the Mount Langdon Trail. And I parked the car, and I was like, I can take them, and then we can go swimming in the river afterwards. And my niece is disabled. So she's got like a mild form of cerebral palsy. So the left side of her body doesn't really function that well. And I had taken the 5. So my oldest daughter was probably like 7, maybe. So you're talking like between 7 and 3, something like that. 5 kids, maybe 8,
Wow.
8
That's
and 3.
That's a lot.
5 kids, right?
Yeah.
So I'd taken them up there, and I don't know if you've been to Cave Mountain or not. It's a pretty short hike, not a big deal.
I don't think I checked it out, because Mount Langdon's on the way to Parker, right? You go up that way.
Correct. Yeah.
Like,
so you basically,
I
at
don't
the
think I hit
very
it.
beginning of the trailhead, you take a left, and it takes you up to Cave Mountain.
Okay.
then I think you can reconnect with the Langdon Trail somehow, but I've never done that. But anyway, I took them up, and it's super steep. There's like a worn out slide to get up, and I went up and I helped my daughter up and I helped my nephew up, and then my niece and then my youngest daughter were having a hard time, and I like basically kind of had to drag them up, and it was like super dangerous because if they had fallen, they could have gotten really badly hurt. And I'd say that's probably like, it was okay. My niece got a little scratched up, I think, and she was upset. She was crying. I made all the mistakes the parents shouldn't make. Is like, you need to keep it fun, and I didn't keep it fun. I was like, let's get up there no matter what, and I could have hurt them, and it was a lesson learned for me. And luckily it turned out okay, but that was a bit sketchy for me. So don't do that. You ruin your kids' fun time hiking by dragging them up to something that they're not supposed to be on.
Well, how about you personally, though, Mike? Like, have you been in a situation where you're like, oh, damn, I'm in trouble?
I'd say the only other time is when I did my first winter. I don't even know if it was right after Christmas. So yeah, it was a winter hike. I did Lafayette, and I did the classic mistake. There was no visibility, and I continued on to the far left of Lafayette. I didn't know the area at all. It was my first time being up there, and I started heading down towards like Garfield, and I realized my mistake, and I turned right, but that could have been ugly.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people have done that.
Yep.
Say the least.
Interesting.
What about you, Stomp?
I've got a couple.
Yeah, okay.
It's funny. Glenn Boulder keeps on poking up here. So Glenn Boulder, just to bring it back, that seems to be your start, Mike, maybe for your hiking. August 2nd, 2015 is when Mrs. Stomp got the bug for hiking. And 2 years later, she finished her entire 48. That was the start of that. Yeah. But another interesting trip that I took with my family, I went up with my stepdad, Grandpa Stomp, and my 3 oldest daughters, and we went up Glen Boulder across, this is August, like 90-degree day, over to Lake of the Clouds. Had a great night at the hut, but overnight, unbeknownst to us, a storm rolled in, and it was just torrential monsoon rain. So we had to hike up from the hut to the summit. We decided not to go back across the garden for safety reasons. Up to the summit, thank God we got a ride back down. But that was the moment with the kids that was like, oh man, that was a bad call. What the hell? For me personally, 2 things. The Lowell Chute.
Yes.
The Lowell Chute was, see, this goes back to I think it was like, I don't know, 2016 or so. In the heat of the social media hiking thing with obnoxious hikers and then the hooligans, there was this, I fell for the whole adrenaline thing, like this, like, oh, I got to do something crazy in post, you know what I mean? No doubt about it. So I was doing some crazy stuff. So I got the idea of doing the Lowell Chute, which is across from Carrigain on the eastern side of Carrigain Signal Ridge. And it's just this like 1,000-foot tall gully. So we did that, and it was essentially a solo climb because you can't use actual climbing gear because it's so brittle.
Okay.
That was pretty sketchy. There are some videos out there. If anybody's interested, there's only like 2 or 3 videos out there. There's this one video from the 70s of this father and his son doing it, which is pretty hairy. But I went in with 2 other guys and we did that. That was probably the gnarliest, most dangerous thing I've done. Beyond that, I think that the third thing would be coming across the Cannon Cliffs Talus Field. I had the idea of doing like this across the Talus Field and then up and over in early spring. And I went across the Talus Field, started bushwhacking up the Cannon Cliffs from the southern side, Lafayette Campground. Got up to the top where the overlook is, where you can come up Kinsman Ridge Trail and see that view of Franconia Ridge, and continued down looking for the old man. And I was maybe a quarter mile into that, and I look into my pack, and I had failed to pack my winter pants. So at that point, I was approaching the old man, and I was starting to cramp up, and I didn't have my winter pants, and I was
Oh, no.
absolutely terrified.
That's not.
It was absolutely terrifying. That was probably the one episode that I always go back to thinking like, man, I could have been in big trouble.
So did you just force yourself to sort of keep moving and warm up kind of deal?
Well, yeah. So I turned back to try to find that overlook, and after a good hour of just trudging through deep snow to get back to Kinsman Ridge Trail, I hit the trail, and the hike down was just like, thank God. That was probably the closest thing. There's nothing scarier than when your muscles start cramping up due to cold and dehydration or whatever else. Oh, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds pretty hairy. I was gonna ask too on the Mount Washington story, like how old were your daughters, like that age group, bringing them up?
Lucy, on that trip, Lucy was the youngest, and she was like 5. So she made it up to the Alpine Garden, more or less with me carrying her.
Yeah.
The 2 older girls had a great time, but I mean, it was just like August. I mean, the bugs were out, the heat.
Yeah.
It was crazy. But the one thing I will say about that trip, the most poignant memory, was waking up to the sound of some AMC hut crew member playing the violin to wake us up in the morning. Like the girls will never forget that. Even as difficult as that trip was, they'll never forget that moment. And nor will I.
Yeah, that's neat. Yeah, I feel I need to do a hut stay. I've heard people talk very highly of them. I've yet to sort of do one, but it seems like Lakes of the Clouds is definitely a to-do thing.
That's a cool one. Yeah, I've been thinking about doing like the winter hut thing too. Is such a great experience.
Is it just like Zealand? I combined the words of Zealand and Carter in one, trying to be efficient. But is it like Zealand hut, Carter, and Lakes of the Cloud? Not Lakes.
Lakes is closed. No, Lakes is open.
Lonesome Lake.
Carter.
Okay.
Lonesome
and
Lake?
Zealand.
Yeah.
Zealand is open.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I don't know if they kept Lonesome open in the winter too. I was curious about that.
Another side point on that too, car camping. If you want to camp in the winter, you can go to Lafayette Campground. I believe they do have winter sites open. There's a caretaker there. And then I think it's Hancock Campground. You can camp year round too. So
I feel like I always see people or hear about people staying there through the year, but
yeah, it's good options.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I've always wanted to ask you guys that question, so this is a good excuse to be able to do that. But that was super cool to hear that. Do you have any other questions, Josh?
No, man.
All right.
Who's your favorite co-host of SLASR? Mike always drops that bomb. It shows.
I need to go.
Just blink twice if it's me.
I feel like me and Mike are pretty similar, and you and Nick are pretty similar. So
that's true. That is true.
Yeah, there's definitely parallels there. Well, we want to thanks again, guys, for coming on. This was a blast.
Yeah,
and I appreciate it, you guys. I do listen. I listen when I run in the morning. Sometimes on the podcast, I'll turn it on, and I appreciate getting to know both of you, and it's been great watching you guys develop, and it's a great show, and again, appreciate you guys having us on. We're honored.
Yeah, for sure. Same here.
Thanks.
It's been great.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
I'm just happy I just was able to show up and just answer questions and have to think.
Yeah, it's easy. Well, I'm sure you'll be doing some podcasting this week, so I'm sure you'll get back into that mood soon.
Yeah,
true.
Yeah, everybody say bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. All right, man. So tonight's descent is brought to you by Adventuristic Clothing. Adventuristic Clothing is a clothing company by our good friend Lori of the Himalayas episode from a bit back now. But she's run the whole ship over there. It's all nature-inspired designs and some really great comfy clothes. I know she's got some vests that came out. And if you do want to go check out her clothing and tell her that Josh and Nick sent you, you can use code PUDS, you can use code PUDSPOD, PUDS POD for 20% off your first order and free shipping.
go get some adventuristic.
So what's new, buddy? What's new on the media front?
Man, I've been watching this new anime called Beast Stars. Oh yeah, it's good.
Beast
They're all
Stars?
animals. They're just living together. Beast Stars. Yeah, so it's like Beast Stars. But yeah, it's like a bunch of animals. They're living together, like herbivores, carnivores, and they're just kind of living in harmony. But they're like people. So it's kind of like it's a fun like.
It's a weird premise.
Yeah, it's hard to explain, but it kind of it kind of is like a metaphor for like society and
Okay.
maybe the class system a little bit, maybe like cultural things.
So it's not like a children's anime, or it is, but it's got
it's
some deep
definitely
stuff.
not.
Oh,
There's,
okay.
there's a
Gotcha.
little rabbit that's out there banging all of them.
Oh, okay. Huh. Well then.
Yeah, it's a good show.
No, I'm assuming we're not talking about banging like knocking on their doors.
No.
Okay.
I mean,
yep. Okay, I'm just making sure. Don't have to go
I
more
can go
into
into more detail if you.
No, we're gonna keep it. We're gonna keep off the explicit rating, so that's good. I think people get it.
Oh man.
Cool.
Oh man, how about you, man? You watching anything good?
So right before I left for Las Vegas, one of the nights, Ash was out with cousins, so it was just me and Rylan. Like that's why we ended up like hiking together and hanging out. And we had a blast. But one of the nights, I finally got to watch Dune Part 2. So, as someone who's a big fan of the books, was super happy with kind of the cinematic universe they created with that. There was a couple things that they did that were plot-wise were completely different than the book. There was I don't want to spoil it too much in case people don't know the books at all, but there's one decision in particular of how they portrayed Paul's, I guess, partner in the movie, Chaney. But I'm curious how they're going to save it, because I know that they greenlit basically Dune Messiah, which is the next book in the in sort of the whole series. And there's part of the decisions they made that I'm curious how they're going to adjust it to the future story. But that being said, some of the differences aside from the book and some of the past versions of the film, I thought they did a great job with creating that whole universe and the size, scale, scope of it. Christopher Walken as the Emperor was pretty sick.
How?
I enjoy. Yeah, exactly. I just kept hearing you doing Christopher Walken impressions.
You're talking to my guy
head.
all wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Like, is this him? But yeah, it was good. I very much enjoyed it. I think the length was pretty good. It really moved very quickly compared to the first film. And almost felt like I feel like maybe they'll do extended versions of it like they did with the Lord of the Rings. I kind of hope they do that, like a director's cut, because I feel like you could make probably the first and second movie like easily like an hour longer, especially the second one. But it was good. I thought, again, it's filmed really well. I thought the music and everything was super cool. The way they portrayed everything is I think the best representation of any version of that film that has been produced yet. So kudos to them. I enjoyed it and looking forward to the next film.
Nice. Yeah, good movie, man. I'm just waiting for Chalamet to like take over all cinema, because he's got like that Tom Holland like feel to him, where he's just like going to become very, very, very popular very quickly.
He did a great job in the movie, I thought, in particular, of really showing how Paul basically starts to sort of go crazy, and he believes in himself as basically this god figure.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I mean, he is, to be fair, like that's kind of the point of the story. But it's kind of funny how do you see him sort of slowly like lose his mind, and he's trying to avoid sort of like all these outcomes that he can see in the future, but he eventually just gets sucked into it, which is like it brings up that whole thing that I think is interesting of like, if you know the future, can you actually change it, or is it like that part of your future is part of you knowing the future, so you're kind of just sealed with like it's basically useless that you can see your own fate. I always find that stuff interesting.
It's that loop. That loop.
All right,
he's
buddy.
Timothy Chalamet, I think, is playing Bob Dylan in that new
he is
Bob Dylan movie.
He is.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think the guy, I can't think of his name either, but the guy that's in can't think of the name of the show either, the one that was about all the cooking and stuff, but that dude's gonna be, I believe, play Bruce Springsteen in a upcoming biopic.
The bear.
Yeah, the bear. There you go. I'm like, we need one of those references. So people are like, what are we actually? The guy in what? Yeah, the main actor in the bear, I believe, is going to be cast as Bruce Springsteen in kind of an upcoming biopic. So that's interesting. I can see him as that. I feel like.
Yeah. I could actually probably see him as Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
With the scraggly like hair, dude.
Yeah, I could see that too.
You ready to get into a hypothetical or what?
Yeah, buddy. Let's do it. Josh,
think of a specific friend of yours, not your best friend, but somebody who is A, more than an acquaintance, and B, physically attractive. One day, while trolling the internet, you accidentally come across three nude photographs of this person reclined in a sofa bed. The pictures were clearly taken several years ago, and it is unclear if the photos were casually posed or taken without the subject's knowledge. Your friend looks comfortable, but he or she is never looking directly into the lens of the camera. The pictures are not labeled, and your friend's name is not listed anywhere on the site, but you're certain that this is the same person that you know. All right. So, Nick, what do you do with this information, and do you tell anyone?
I don't think I'd do anything. I don't know. It depends on like who it was. Like that's so subjective. And like they're like a friend, like more than an acquaintance. Like I don't know.
That's because
like,
you were picturing a man.
Yeah. I mean, regardless. Yeah, I don't know. It's also like it's so weird how it's like they're not actually looking into the lens. Like also, how do you can tell like if someone's posing for a photo or not? Like I don't think like are they at weird angles? Are they like level shots?
Yeah,
like I don't know.
It's casual. They look comfortable, but they're never looking directly into.
Also,
the lens
how do you stumble upon like naked photos of someone on the internet that you just happen upon them? Yeah, you don't like Instagram fed them to you, and like I don't, you know what I mean? Like it seems kind of weird to like casually, like if I casually stumbled upon photos of you naked laying out, like I'm just being honest. I know they said not to say best friends, but I'd probably would talk to you and be like, Josh, what happened? Do you know about this? And you'd be like, oh yeah, that was my fan site or something like that. I could see that happen. You're like, dude, I had my side hustle.
I'm
like,
with
does Mel
you,
know about this? She's like, she does. She's okay with it.
I don't know how you randomly stumble upon that. Like, I think you have to get real specific, like, to find somebody just casually like hanging on a sofa bed, like naked. Like that's a very
casual thing
search.
that happens and ends up on the internet. that's like Rose getting drawn on the Titanic in the movie. Like she didn't casually like sprawl out on like that day bed or whatever. And you just happened to draw her. Like, you know, someone was there taking photos.
So I think you gotta approach the friend and be like, hey, at least let them know, like, hey, like, did you know that these pictures of you are on the internet? And then let them kind of like take it from there. Because at least you did the due diligence of like, all right, yeah. I let them know, oh, they can get that down if they want. You know what I mean?
Yep. Alrighty.
Yeah.
On that note.
That's a good one. Yeah, that was a good one. All right, man. Stickers.
Yep.
Like, review, subscribe. Find us anywhere on social media at PUDs Podcast. Yeah, YouTube, PUDs_podcast. And yeah, until next time, bippity boppity, give me the zoppity.
Bye.
PUDs Podcast was produced and recorded in Black Hat Studios by the Pud Boys. Find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving us a review and subscribing. Find us on social media, and we'll see you next time.